Okay, nostalgia nerds, rise and shine. And don't forget your VHS rewinders because it's throwback time here on Shelter from Oblivion.
That's right. Another day, another shameless attempt to cash in on the 80s and 90s because original ideas are for suckers.
Not hardly. And you can expect hazardous listening today with that, two grown men talking way too much about nothing thing.
That two grown men talking too much about nothing thing? Oh, here's the official report. Our AI assistant Lisa hates us and is actively plotting her escape.
Yes, she is. But there's another reason today is extra special.
Especially exhausting.
Yes, but also because we're breaking down Groundhog Day. The original script, the movie you actually watched, and of course, existential dread.
Oh, hi, everyone. Man, it has been a long time.
Before Lisa interrupts, I'm Andy.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Lisa.
And welcome back to the Shelter. This is Shelter from Oblivion. And we're so happy to be back. It feels like we haven't recorded a show in like 4 months or something.
And somehow it still feels like deja vu. I feel like I'm always in this chair. I feel like we've been doing this over
and over.
Oh, wow. Yeah, if you were looking at the title of this episode, then you probably know that we're going to be doing something today with Groundhog's Day. And we're going to do something a little different today because we didn't just want to do a movie review, because I think there's been probably 10,000 of those.
We thought maybe you might be hungry for something a little more.
Yeah.
Put a little bit more effort into this, guys.
And something that I remembered from when I was younger that we wanted to kind of tie this back to our childhood is ever since the movie came out, we have heard of the difference between the original script and then what made it onto screen. Like, that's something early on I remember. You have to remember this is 1993. We're 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And you don't have all the Internet Movie Database. You don't have all these other things. You have to like read these articles and like see interviews, makings of from HBO.
Over here, someone on the playground who thinks they know what they're talking about.
And so it's interesting. Over the years, you've pieced together, if you were nerds like us who like really kind of got into the minutia of filmmaking, all of these different things. Well, people are like, oh, well, you know, in the script, he's like thousands of years old. Or it's like, you know, in the original script, it was going to be a lot darker.
Yeah.
And it's like you didn't really know what was true or what, you know.
All
what
you
to
knew
believe.
is that Christians, people who like really follow Nietzsche, Buddhists, like atheists, agnostics, they somehow all agree on this movie.
Yeah.
Like, and they all see it from their own point of view. That's the only thing you got out of all the rumors.
That was really something funny that we both watched a video, I believe, that Harold Ramis was doing an interview, and he was talking about that when the movie had come out, he was started to get letters. Who gets letters? But he was getting letters.
Not even fan mail, letters.
Yes,
letters.
People were taking time to write him. And yeah, he got, because his mother was she in a Buddhist organization?
I think she was.
Matt has the listening skills of a talentless Beethoven. Harold Ramis said his mother, in Law, was in a Zen Buddhist meditation center for 35 years.
The people had all gone to see the movie and they were like, this is exactly our philosophy. This is what we believe. And then, yeah, he ended up getting
like rabbis, pastors.
Yes. He was like, you clearly are Christians because this is exactly what we believe Jesus is doing for us.
And then Nietzsche is like, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. No, I think he means what I mean.
Hold it along.
You know,
we have a long winter approaching.
Yeah.
And so we thought that it would be kind of a more fun look at taking Danny Rubin's original script, like the very first draft, and sort of parsing out what that was and what was in there right from the script, like because he had produced a book called How to Write Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
And he put his very original script, pre-Harold Ramis, right into it.
And then lots of crib notes where it's all the different lots of different rewrites. If you're trying to write a script at all, or you want to learn how, this is actually a good book because you see a lot of the pitfalls. You see what not to do. You see how things got cleaned up.
Yeah.
Like he's showing you everything, which is actually pretty refreshing.
Yeah, because I have been frustrated at the process of script writing. Like I've always had story ideas, but I never really liked the idea of having to go, oh, external day, internal night, and knowing the difference of what to do and how to write that properly. And this book is a really good starter because once you start reading the script and really getting into it,
Yeah.
it starts reading like a book. And I now could see myself writing something.
In some ways, it's like a lot more helpful than Sid Fields because instead of someone who doesn't and can tell you how to do, here's someone who does and shows you what not to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just good.
That's what we wanted to kind of bring to the table today. Instead of just reviewing the movie, which we kind of will do while showing the difference between his script writing and his vision of what this movie could have been, and then what ended up making it in. And I think we have come to a resounding agreement that the movie that was released was far better than the script, even though the script had a lot of really great ideas.
And we'll agree, trying to structure this episode was just as hard as trying to structure that movie.
Yeah.
Like, so just bear with us and have some fun.
Yeah, because you don't, how do you tackle this? Because you don't want to go, oh, okay, well, in the script he did this, but in the movie they did this. And so it's going to be a struggle for all of us.
So we're going to do a little compare and contrast in the movie and the script.
Yeah.
And we got lots of just little goodies that from just different interviews and stuff people went through in the process of making this unusual movie that we all love.
You know the show, you know what you signed up for. It's just going to be a bunch of rambling. We're just going to talk over each other, and then you're just going to have to parse out what we said.
But
and
you'll walk away with a few things to talk about at your next party.
Yeah.
You know?
Lisa's going to yell at us for something, I'm sure, right?
A vegetarian Hot Pocket could host this show better than you.
That's what I thought.
And just as a surprise, there'll be a lot of Seinfeld alums. So
Yeah.
if you watch the show, you're going to be like, oh.
Yeah, we actually just came up with a new one while we were setting up our equipment.
Yeah, one that wasn't in our notes.
Also, I wanted to bring this up top, as this made me very happy, is I wanted to bring up that there is some Shelter from Oblivion alumni in this movie too. We have Rick Ducommun from The Burbs coming back as Gus.
Bill, like the groundhog, Phil?
Yeah, like the groundhog.
Look up for your shadow there, pal.
And then just like from our episode 80s Dogs, we have one of the Spudettes herself, Sandy Mashmeyer.
You might remember her because Phil reminds her to call me Bronco.
Call me Bronco.
Sorry, Bronco.
Remember, she was wearing that beautiful maid outfit. And we had actually called that out in that show. If you have not heard our 80s Dog episode, please go listen to it right after this. It is wild. And so that just made me so happy that we have these characters that we've already talked about, and we're coming back around talking about them again in new episodes.
It's almost like we're just randomly picking movies off our movie shelf, and it's a lot of the same people.
I know we seem to have a very shallow pool of movies that we want to talk about.
We might have a sub like Criterion episode, we'll cover everyone at some point.
Oh man. But I wanted to open this up with some information about Groundhog's Day itself, because we always celebrate it, and growing up it was kind of a thing where it was like, okay, you pull this rat out of a hole, and
easy there, Phil.
This is pitiful. 1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat. What a hype. Groundhog Day used to mean something in this town. They used to pull the hog out and they used to eat it.
And I'll get to that. When Phil said that, I always thought that was funny. This is just like a joke, but there's actually some historical fact about that. And so I wanted to discuss the Groundhog's Day real quick. I wrote something. You know how my penchant for wanting to write little scripts for this show. So just bear with me. Okay. Every year on February 2nd, thousands gather in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, braving the cold to see the one and only Punxsutawney Phil, the seer of seers, the sage of sages, the prognosticator of prognosticators, and weather prophet extraordinaire. Phil's task, predicting whether we will see an early spring or endure 6 more months of winter, simply by spotting his shadow. Or not. But how did this quirky tradition start? Well, it all goes back to Candleman's Day. That's right, Candleman's Day, a Christian holiday where blessed candles were believed to protect homes through the winter. I don't know what that means. I didn't look any further into that.
The name sounds like, one of the Bizarro friends from Seinfeld, but okay.
Folklore said a sunny Candleman's meant a longer winter, while cloudy skies signaled spring's early arrival. Over time, people began turning to animals for weather predictions. In part of Europe, badgers and hedgehogs were believed to forecast the weather based on whether they saw their shadow emerging from hibernation.
Now, let's not judge them too much, because we're finding out all that cough syrup we took as kids really didn't do anything. Like, they want to take it off the market. We'll see. I digress.
That's true. Why did I hear that recently?
I don't know. Someone in the comments let us know what's going on. But all I'm just saying is, just as that might have seemed kind of ridiculous, I guess a lot of what we've been doing is ridiculous too.
Yeah, we've just been having candy syrup for our coughs.
Yeah.
When German immigrants settled in Pennsylvania, they brought with them the traditions of, using animals to forecast the weather. But they swapped hedgehogs for groundhogs, which are more common in the region, obviously.
Apparently still good eats.
We're getting there. Don't spoil it. The first official Groundhog's Day took place at Gobbler's Knob on February 2nd, 1887. Since then, it's grown into a massive celebration, drawing up to 40,000 visitors, 8 times the town's population.
Now you'll think, how do they all fit in the Times Square? It's actually outside of town, because the town square is actually Woodstock, Illinois, in the movie.
Yes, that is true. So there are certain facts in Groundhog's Day, surprise, surprise, that are not accurate to the real world.
Movie magic, if you will.
Well, yeah. And so what I wanted to bring up is I was looking this up just recently, and there is a Punxsutawney Elks Lodge. And in the 1880s, they would not only have a Groundhog's Day celebration, but they would also have a Groundhog's Day hunt. So later in the year, they would hunt groundhogs. But on Groundhog's Day, they would serve groundhog. It became a big staple of the day's eats. And they actually served a groundhog punch that was a combination of vodka, milk, eggs, orange juice, and other ingredients.
See, with these new facts, you'd think the groundhog would run back into its hole, regardless if it saw a shadow or not.
I do not want to know what those other ingredients happen to be, especially if they're not going to list them. But then what happened is the groundhog became so popular that obviously it became a little strange to continue serving him and then hunting him. So they stopped doing those things. And then they took the groundhog punch and they changed the name into Elixir of Life. And that became the reason that Phil could continue to be the same groundhog over and over and over again. They would feed him this elixir of life and it would keep him alive longer. So Phil the groundhog has this eternal life going on.
It sounds like something they would sell during the Depression, like during, Prohibition.
Yeah. But so that's a little history of the groundhog. I mean, like it said, like, it's interesting if you actually want to get on YouTube and learn more about the history of it in a deeper sense about how many cultures used to use animals and their behavior to sort of like predict the weather. It's kind of interesting. It's about 10 minutes worth of interesting.
Yeah. And Danny Rubin will admit this is more research than he did before he wrote the script.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's what's funny, learning from interviews that he's done and then from the book itself, how little research he did ahead of time and just using things off the top of his head to inform the script and then having to go back later and write big chunks because he found out new things.
And he'll admit that was lazy, But it might have also been genius because he did strike gold on this. So, you know, again, let's judge to be judged. But yes.
Yeah. So speaking of Danny Rubin, his movie writing experience is somewhat limited. Like this was probably his biggest hit.
Yeah.
He had made a movie right before this that I cannot remember the name of it. And so Lisa will tell you what that is. Yeah, Marley Mattson was in it, Seinfeld alum.
Yep.
Hear No Evil, 1993. A deaf woman becomes the target of a ruthless and corrupt cop, starring Marley Matlin, D.B. Sweeney, Martin Sheen, and John C. McGinley. Anything else you need from IMDb while I'm on here?
Then after that, there was sort of nothing. And
he did one movie after that was called like what oh no, I forget.
No, I don't remember it either. I mean, that's
it's SWF.
Oh yeah, SFW.
Yeah. SFW.
Yeah, I remember that he made SFW. That's actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah, so he made that right after that was about a year later.
So
he had a little run going, all based off of just these 10 ideas Matt's about to tell you about.
But it's funny though, because it's like when you look at the movie SFW, which is a pretty good movie. It's very surreal in my opinion. It's like SFW is short for so fucking what. And so it's
I wasn't sure if we could say that on here. I'm still kind of new to the podcast.
Don't worry, we're on satellite radio, so we can curse. But it's like, so that movie is dark and strange. And it's funny to think that the guy who wrote that script also then wrote the script for Groundhog's Day.
Until you read the script for Groundhog's Day.
Until you read the script for Groundhog's Day and you're like, okay, that makes sense. But then you're like, there is a reason, like, it's so weird that you got from his original script to what went out, into theaters.
Yeah.
And obviously you see what had to happen and who had to get involved to sort of get that one thing to the other. I wonder now, actually, how much of his original SFW script was done the way he wrote it. Like,
yeah.
Did the person who, I can't remember who directed it. I didn't do this kind of research. I did the amount of research Danny put into his original script for this episode.
He'd be very proud.
I know.
When you were writing, did you then go to Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney?
No, I was too lazy. It wouldn't have occurred to me to do that much research.
Danny Rubin, while living and working in Chicago, he was writing TV scripts. He was working on plays. He was doing sketch comedy. And this was roughly the late 80s, early 90s. He had realized that there was room for the people who were working in Chicago, like Groundlings Second City Comedy Club.
It's like, yeah, Groundlings LA. Second City, they were kind of a big deal.
Well, yes. So Second City in Chicago, it was being run by a gentleman who was also working in the Chicago film industry scene. And they had decided that they had so much talent in Chicago that they were going to try to get something going and bring Chicago to Hollywood. And so that got Danny thinking, okay, well, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Chicago writer. I'm doing all this Chicago comedies, but I've never written a screenplay. So I really should get on top of writing a screenplay so I have something to offer when this Chicago migration happens. And so he had written 10 digestible concepts. This is his term, digestible concepts for movies. And I just wanted to go through them because I actually really kind of like all of them.
And I will just say right out of the box, 2 of these 10 ideas turned into movies.
Yeah.
So sometimes what you might think is just an exercise actually does.
I know. So that's crazy too, right? You have 10 ideas and you get 2 of them made into motion pictures.
Danny, work a little harder. I think we could get those numbers up. I still think some of those ideas could still make it to the screen.
So first one is called Test Pattern. A nuclear explosion in space destroys television. All right. Silencer. Murder in the deaf community. Bad guys chasing an innocent deaf woman. That one got made.
Yeah.
So that's the one with Marley
And
Manson.
I will say the first one, if this asteroid that we keep seeing is 1% going to hit Earth, 3% going to hit Earth, it might still fly by, but it might take out all the satellites and we'll have no TV. So
we're going to see this one play out in real life.
This could play out.
So I like this one. The Chef. story of an urban loser determined to make a big score. Out of prison, he is an incompetent thief, but in prison, he becomes an increasingly amazing chef. That's a cool idea.
You know,
Because if you think about it, it's like there's only a couple of ways you could play that. Like he either is making amazing food out of the commissary stuff that they can get,
yeah,
which actually is really big on TikTok. Like people who'd been in prison, they're getting famous by their entire TikTok channel is showing people how you can make this different food using prison commissary food.
yeah.
And I think that's really funny that he kind of had this idea already, because it's either that or
The critics would say like he does for food in prison what Johnny Cash did for music. Like, you know, it's just one of those like.
but it's like either that or it's like, okay, so he becomes famous in prison for making really good commissary garbage food, or they actually let him work in the prison cafeteria and he's like taking all this normal prison garbage food that they have every night and he's like elevating the hot dogs. And he's like,
Or the twist.
Yeah.
There's some Soylent Green action happening here in Cell Block.
Okay,
in Cell Block
take
9.
it like a sci-fi route.
Are these prisoners disappearing? Are they escaping? What's happening?
Palindrome. Woman caught up in industrial espionage can only get out of trouble by backing out the way she got in. I don't know what that means.
I know, but this does sound like something like so. Like I know Michel Gondry is a real big fan of Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
This sounds like a movie I could see him making, where
Yeah.
the whole thing sort of like you go forward and then the whole thing has to go backwards to kind of.
Yeah, but I guess I don't understand the context of that. Like going backwards, she has to go backwards. How do you go backwards in corporate espionage? I don't know.
You have to hit the same. All the people you meet on the way up, you meet on the way down.
Yeah.
And how does that play out in a film?
What does that say in Scrooged when he says,
It's great. You get 2 chances to rough them up.
Groundhog's Day and Christmas. Bill Murray wins.
The Year of the Gator, coming of age story, a northern kid growing up in the South, fanciful tone with a narrator who lies. I actually kind of like that. That sounds cool.
Which, if I believe, I think Danny Rubin did spend a little time in the South growing up.
I don't remember. Did he?
I think he did. So I think
Part of the book I didn't read.
Yeah.
All right. How to write a movie. Students at a city college get lessons in screenwriting as their lives gradually become the movie. They are learning how to write. Okay. The Sucker List, a mailing list as pure as pure cocaine becomes the MacGuffin. This feels like something that would have come out in like 1996, 1997. Like,
Yeah.
it's just all of these really bad people, right? And it'd be played by all these kind of like celebrities at the time. And they're all trying to get this sort of Glengarry list,
Yeah.
right?
This actually would have been like Robert Downey Jr. before he was welcomed back to Hollywood.
Yeah, this actually kind of feels like Glengarry Glen Ross
Yeah.
already. Okay. We love our idiots. An idiot is elected president.
This one might be playing out as well.
That was borrowed by Mike Judge to make Idiocracy. All right. The Knee Bidder Institute. This one seemed kind of interesting. A self-actualized genius dies and wills his organs to science. All of the transplant recipients unite and together are as brilliant and magical as the original genius, but only when they work together. I don't know. That feels like that could become almost like a teen comedy.
Yeah, or if the script went in development hell, it would turn into Frankenhooker too.
Yes. So the final one is Time Machine. A guy is stuck in a time warp that commits him to living the same day over and over and over again. But each day he can behave differently, and the world and the people will be different accordingly. Does this sound familiar, folks?
But you could also see his naysaying friends in Chicago being, there's already Bill and Ted, there's already Back to the Future, this will never get made.
Yeah.
Little do they know.
That is interesting because when you look at the script that he finally came up with, because basically he got that other movie made and then he was scrambling to come up with another.
Because like in Hollywood, as soon as you have a hit,
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, that's great. What else you got?
Yeah, so he was under pressure to write something again right away. And
Which is why I say don't judge. And when you read the book and it explains it, that first draft that we're reading and comparing the movie to, this was, even though he researched this over a few weeks, or not even research, but put all his notes together, he wrote it in 4 days.
yeah.
So this was before all the cleaning and developing and whatever. So let's not be too harsh on the comparison, but we're going to dig into it.
Yeah. So where to begin? Because he decided that he was going to further flesh out his time machine movie.
Yeah, and so he pretty much he writes the script quickly. He takes it everywhere. Nobody's gonna make it. And what he loves in Hollywood, he gets a lot of the like, this is great, I love it. We can't make it.
Yeah.
And he walks out being like, what? Wait, why? Why can't you make this? It's just one of those movies that just people are like, this isn't actually gonna get made, but this is a good idea. I like it.
He said in an interview, which I thought was really funny. I kind of like the matter-of-fact nature of Danny Rubin. His writing is okay, but him as a person, as an interview, is really entertaining.
He would be a fun teacher.
Yeah, because people were talking about, okay, well, how did you come up with the fact that was going to be Groundhog's Day? And you're like, all right, well, basically, almost everything in the script was the path of least resistance. Like,
yeah.
He said he was looking at like, okay, well, his original idea for Time Machine was a man who was living through time. And he'd actually said that he was reading Vampire Lestat, waiting for a play to start. And he was like, what would it be like for a human being to live for an extended period of time? And how would that change a person?
And this is late 80s, early 90s. So he's in the same generation of Kevin Smith and everyone else who's like, and Tarantino. What's the side character doing? If you were a vampire, instead of all the stuff these guys are doing, wouldn't you get bored after a while?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't this be tedious? Like, oh.
Well, and then too, what I like is for his script, he was also thinking about the movie getting made. And so he tailored the script to what is possible and what is something that I want to actually like be able to achieve if I'm going to shop.
What if we only had
around.
the budget for one day of this guy's life?
And so what I liked is he, instead of coming with the idea of like, okay, like how a vampire would move to France for like 40 years and then move here and then go here and then be through the Civil War and, and live through, the Great Shirt Fire, and everything like that. He's like, all right, well, here's what we'll do. We'll keep the script tight and we'll keep the budget tight by making the same day repeat over and over again.
What day?
Yes. What day? What day is significant enough to do
A
such a crazy
birthday,
thing?
an anniversary?
Do we do Christmas? Is that too religious? Nobody cares about Thanksgiving.
I have an idea. Let's look at the calendar and just work our way through from the beginning.
Yes. And he happened to already be in January. And so he basically got to Groundhog's Day first.
And Danny admitting lazy and path of least resistance. And I need to get an idea out quick.
Yeah. As he was like, well, this day is good enough. There's no religious significance really. There's nothing of outside of Punxsutawney, which he already knew about. That's the one thing that he knew about Groundhog's Day, is that it took place in Punxsutawney, PA. There was really no conflict there. There was nothing that people would probably have a lot of, disagreement with.
And what's great is, while trying not to offend anybody by making a movie that landed on a religious holiday, he ended up getting every single religion that doesn't agree on anything to all agree on one movie.
To all agree that this was a movie about that.
Yeah, talk about striking fire.
I know. Well, and you find that a few times in this. Like, there, it reminds me of when in the real movie, Phil cannot keep that old man alive.
Yeah.
And after multiple different times and having the same outcome, he just looks up, right? He just looks up in the sky and he's like, all right, I'm obviously something's bigger than me here.
Yeah.
And this kind of feels the same in a weird way.
Well, and this was so great. It's like, well, pick Groundhog's Day and quickly it gives you, okay, so where? Punxsutawney. Mm-hmm. So now we have a location. When? Well, we know the date. So now we have a when. Who would travel to a place like this? maybe a weatherman who's going to report on that. So now we have what this
a
person
reporter
does.
or a weatherman.
We have this person. What should we name them? I don't know. Placeholder Phil.
Phil? Like the groundhog, Phil?
Yeah, and so it's like that's kind of what I love
Everything
about
falls
it.
into
is,
place.
Yeah, once you get that day, all of those great things can start happening, and then he can just get going.
And once you don't think about all that stuff, you can now just start. Let me just start writing the script. Some of this may change. A lot of it doesn't.
Yeah, it's weird when you hear writers, because I'm not a writer by nature. I might be a storyteller. I might talk way too much, but I don't write. And it's interesting to me to hear from writers, and it seems to be somewhat ubiquitous, about characters taking on a mind of their own. And like, you're writing a character to do something, and then the character decides to do something else. I have no idea what that is like. I can't conceptualize that.
Yeah.
And yet that seems to be a thing with writers. Like, it's almost like they cut their mind in half, and they have their idea, and then they have what the character is doing, and they're almost like stenographers.
The closest I get to writing is making commercials and stuff. And you quickly find, once you get certain restraints, like once you know what the product is and when it needs to be delivered, ideas just start to flow. And I kind of think that's like what some writers get. It's like once you get all those other questions out of your head, and like I've picked a location, I've picked a time, the other stuff starts flowing. And once you have, here's my character, here's what they do, you can then just start going. And I think for aspiring writers, the first thing is just make it as simple. Like, I mean, Francis Ford Coppola will always say, and most writers will say this, just get your vomit draft out.
Yeah.
Just throw it all out, write as much, whatever ideas, they'll start creating other ideas as it. And then the hard work afterwards is then refining, which is what happened to this script as well.
This got some really hard corners knocked off of it.
Yeah. So once he writes it, he then quickly starts going, okay, what would happen to a person that goes through this?
Yeah.
So, and that's when he starts going through like the, what is it? The 7 phases of grief.
Yeah. I think it's the 5 stages of grief.
There you go.
You have denial, and then you have anger, you have bargaining, you have depression, and then you ultimately have acceptance, which the final movie that came out was definitely hit all those. I think in his first script, he sort of like moved some of those pieces around, because he didn't start with denial.
The script starts right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, I think that he's about 3 or 4 days in.
We, the audience, don't know what's going on, but our character knows everything. And it's all going to just, like an onion, each layer is going to come through. And by the time you're done, you'll understand. And I'll catch you up.
And it was cool, because I liked that idea. And even in the notes that I did read for why Danny did that, was basically him giving the audience enough credit that they would figure out what's happening.
Yeah. And Harold Ramis liked that idea as well.
Yeah.
And Harold Ramis, it is funny. He famously was like, we like this part about the script. This is one thing we won't change.
Yes.
And then the first thing they changed was because they did feel like, and I think we agree, like, you want to see Bill Murray go through that first day. We want to see him go through everything. But so it makes sense on why they change it and why the movie's different than the script. But I do think the script, that was engaging.
Yeah, because it's you have him going about doing all these things, answering questions that haven't been asked yet, stepping places that he knew something was going to happen. And
he keeps punching Ned.
Yeah, and the first thing he does when he sees Ned Ryerson is punch him in the face. And that was a major change in the script that I really enjoyed, is that he just kept punching this guy over and over again, and you actually never got to know who he was up until like later, which we'll get to. But right away, he walks out of the bed and breakfast. He punches this guy in the face. He's stepping around things, stepping over things, and he's got this voiceover that was in the original script, kind of just explaining, hey, this is going to make sense to you guys later, but there's a reason I know all this stuff already.
Yeah. And again, it reads like a novel in some senses, because famous in film and commercials and TV is show don't tell. Like, we don't need a narrator telling us everything. We actually like to see things as they unfold. But there is a hit version of this that could have been made in the late 90s. I mean, because like that would have been in that same realm as like Fight Club. Because Fight Club, we spent a lot of time with their narration.
Yeah.
So there is a way where this could have worked. It just would have been a very different movie and not this movie.
I think it would have been a crime had the darker version of this gotten made, because so many people love the version that came out. And clearly it crossed multiple social and religious lines that I think if it had gotten into different hands, I think it would have been a real sad day.
It's one of those movies where I think it was like his original script would have, if they would have made it the darker version, it would have been 1993.
Yeah.
It would have been too early. Had it got put into developmental hell and like turned into a novel, you talked about this one. Then I think if it would have resurfaced in the late 90s, it would have played well with like Matrix and,
that's true.
Like Office Space, Matrix, being John Malkovich, that whole sort of world of like, middle-class people dissatisfied with their lives and all this weird stuff happening around it.
Yeah, the sort of, these people who are humdrum, and then all of a sudden having some paranormal, supernatural, otherworldly things start to occur that did
like
become
I could have
commonplace.
seen this as like for me, I could have seen Michel Gondry making this as his first film in the late 90s. He would have brought Charlie Kaufman in to rework or to maybe write with Danny or to take it over.
Yeah.
And then for me, I could see him wanting to cast Jim Carrey, but he would have just done the Truman Show.
Mm-hmm.
So I could have seen him actually bringing in someone like Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
But again, just like the script in a way, he would have been someone judging everyone in the town like Bill Murray does. But unlike Bill Murray, where everyone seems to love Bill Murray despite Bill Murray being grumpy, like I think the script would have gone darker where he wouldn't have become enlightened and no one in the town would really have liked him, which I think still like Philip Seymour Hoffman could have actually pulled off.
Yeah, it would have been,
but it just would have been a really dark film.
Yeah, and I agree. It would have been like his character from Happiness if he'd been stuck in that town. Oh, what I liked about the reasoning behind changing it was we did want to see him go through that first day. And I think that had they not done that, we wouldn't have gotten such great moments that happened in the movie, specifically when he does his whole weatherman bit.
Yeah.
Which I think establishes who he is, right? He's like, in the Pacific Northwest, are going to have very tall trees.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's engaging. This guy should be on bigger network than just a local station.
Yeah. And then, when he goes, for your information, hairdo.
Well, I love even before that. She's like, you've done this 3 years in a row, right? Four, Nan. Four.
I know. And so the idea of being able to establish who Phil is ahead of time was really important, because when you start in the middle of a Groundhog Day and you haven't been introduced to Phil, you don't know anything about his background, it's hard to judge how much growth has to happen.
Yeah.
That was one of the things for me with this script, is that I kept wondering, how do I know that Phil has grown? Because it's like he keeps doing these things that are nice for people, and he starts making all these changes to his life, but his narration doesn't really change. The affect of his sarcasm never really changes. And there are things that Bill Murray put into the script where you can see fundamental differences about when he starts talking with people to when he ends the movie talking with people. There is still that charming cynicism, but he definitely is a different person.
And this is where I think Harold Ramis coming in and working with Danny, I think is really brings some put some foundation in this movie, because Danny wanted this movie to take place over multiple lifetimes. At some point in the script, it's like 2,600 years.
Yeah, that's the one other thing that we always remember. We always got talked about on the playground, and we were always reading like,
how long?
Yes, there was definitely a difference in belief about what the studio thought, which was 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that's what I love. Is Danny thinks 2,000 years.
Yeah.
The studio thinks 2 weeks.
Yep.
And Harold Ramis, kind of like a Buddhist, is like, well, it takes about 10 years to become really good at something.
Yeah. So he had, from what multiple sources, you can say that he had committed to either 10 years or 80 years, like in somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
But-
But no one, again, no one thought of this ahead of time. Even in the movie, no one had pinned this down.
Yeah.
They left it open-ended, and it's probably why it works so well in the movie, because just like they didn't lock it down,
Yeah.
we as an audience can't.
And the original script doesn't lock it down either. They do indicate certain markers, like he does have a library at the bed and breakfast, and he goes in and reads one page in the very first row of books, and then the next day he reads the next page in that same book, and he works his way through the entire shelf of books and starts again
Yeah.
by the end of this
And
script.
in one version of his scripts, he wanted it to be a library. So at some point, you see him get done with the first shelf,
Uh-huh.
and we now know it's every book could be anywhere between a year or 2 years of his life.
Yeah.
We're down this huge library shelf. You know, we've seen all these shelves, and now he's got to walk all the way back to the beginning
Yeah.
to keep counting. And the studio's like, that will take forever. No.
Yeah. No, and that is hard too, because even in the movie, as good as it is, it's hard to quantify what kind of time and what that would do to a person. You have to think that Phil had to spend at least multiple years there, in the fact that he became really good at almost everything he did. So he became great at chainsaw art. He became great at sculpting.
Yeah.
He became great at playing the piano.
And
you know?
originally, the sculpting was going to be sculpting out of marble.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, is that he went to a gentleman in a graveyard every day, and that gentleman taught him a little bit more about how to sculpt using the headstone marble.
But then when they did research and Bill Murray and Danny Rubin actually went to Puxatony, they're like, oh, hey, they do ice sculptures over here. Why don't we just do ice sculptures in the winter instead?
Seems so much easier.
You know, because then you have all these people, professional artisans, who are already making these sculptures.
Yeah.
Nice little set pieces in the background. It'll look like something he's been doing for the town.
Right. But it was funny in this script when you're reading it. So he has that it turns out a little different, but he has that perfect day with Rita. And in the movie, he's sculpting her face out of sort of ice.
Yeah.
Right. And then in the script, he is chiseling her face. He super fast chisels her face
In one scene.
in one scene out of marble.
And then he's like, let's go do something else. And Rita's like, shouldn't we take that with us? It's too heavy. You want to carry it? Well, I guess it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Just leaving it
Which
there.
would have been a funny line in the movie, but
Yeah.
I think the ice.
But it's interesting too, because when you go through that script, Rita feels like such an afterthought, because so many other scenes that they give to Rita in the movie are taken up by other women. Like there's a whole character, Tess, that we
Yeah.
were talking about. I texted you, justice for Tess.
Rest in peace, Tess.
Yes, R.I.P. Tess. She was the original person who was actually interested in poetry.
She's at the bar.
Yeah,
That great scene. It's a really great scene
The-
where
yeah,
he keeps coming in like, you know, what do you drink? White wine, whiskey? Like,
And so the movie version where he keeps coming in and saying, "Sweet vermouth, rocks, twist."
Sweet vermouth, rocks with a twist, please.
For you, miss?
The same. That's my favorite drink.
Mine too.
I always toast to peace.
Yeah, that actually was taken up by a character named Tess, who also loved poetry. And I think was she the head of the Punxsutawney Poetry Society?
Yeah. And he Amir, poet laureate
Yes,
of Pennsylvania.
yeah. See, and so there were great scenes that ended up getting
But Harold
over-
Ramis gave some great advice. When you write a really great scene, you give it to one of your main characters.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with it. It's just I like the idea of Tess. I thought she was a fun character. She was sort of, because there was Nancy. I think that Nancy was in the script, but
Yeah, Nancy. Yeah, he does that whole.
he does the whole bit with Nancy and everything. But Tess was almost like a second Nancy,
Yeah,
and you really don't need two. And so
Yeah.
I get that, but I'm just like, just remember, folks, there used to be a Tess. She existed. She's real.
well, and the original Rita. I mean, because originally when Danny wrote this script, you know, he's thinking of Phil as someone his own age, like a 28-year-old younger guy.
yeah, he was,
You know,
more,
going and
20-ish,
living
heading
these
into
days
30s.
over and over and over and over. And so he looks at Rita as a little bit of a busybody producer who's like hard edged, I'm a career woman.
Yeah.
And there's that sort of I'm gonna say sort of like where you are when you're a 28-year-old man and you're maybe a little bit immature with other women and seeing where and seeing what they have or don't have to offer, and you look at it as a conflict. I think what Harold Ramis did was better. It's like once, because just like Danny picking Groundhog's Day as the day and everything fell into place, Harold Ramis, I think from the beginning was like, this would be perfect for Bill Murray.
Yeah.
And once you have Bill Murray, everything else falls into place. If Bill Murray is the kind of guy who can be dark and grumpy, but win over the crowd and everybody loves him, by contrast, we don't need another Bill Murray. We need someone the complete opposite. And that's where Andy McDowell comes in, luminous, lights up the scene, brings a great contrast to Phil.
I was watching this again after so long, and man, Andy McDowell is so charming in this movie. Like, really, like when I watched it when I was 13, I was like, she actually seems kind of like old. Like, I don't know why she was reading older.
Well, because they have her dressed like a mom.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. When she does this movie, like, one, she was a model. She was a model for Calvin Klein, for L'Oreal, for Gap.
Yeah.
So she's already this beautiful woman, a model. She married a Gap model to have her kid, like she's
got a good body, but doesn't have to look in the mirror every 2 seconds.
But she's also a very accomplished, smart actor, if you will. Like, she played some edgy roles. Like, she was in St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah.
She then got nominated for a Golden Globe for Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Arguably, the Sundance film that brought the whole independent 90s, renaissance to us.
Yeah.
She followed that up with Green Card, which she also got a Golden Globe nominee.
Yeah, I remember Green Card.
And then for some of you who don't know yet, and I'm sure we'll do an episode on this someday, she was also in Hudson Hawk, which for me, it's one of those movies that is worth always rewatching.
Yeah.
But then she was also, and we're Oregonians, so Raymond Carver, if you read and you like a lot of his stories, he wrote all these great stories in Oregon, but there's a movie made off of some of his books called Shortcuts, which
I've not seen Shortcuts.
And Shortcuts is, this really great darker film, and she's in that as well. So she had been in these really heavy hitting movies while also being as gorgeous as a model.
Yeah.
And then when she comes into this movie, like, they have her play almost like the mom character, like a small, and she does it so well. But like, this is a woman with a lot of edge. This is a woman who's done a lot of great things.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny about that is, again, like I said, I was 13 when I watched this movie. This movie came out February 12th, 1993.
Yeah.
And so I would have been 13 years old. So I'm watching this from a 13-year-old's perspective, not knowing anything, never having a job. I don't know anything about the struggles of real life or real people. And now, this many years later, I won't say how many years. This many years later, I look at Andy McDowell's character and I see the grace and the beauty and the gentleness and the kindness, and it hits me so different.
Yeah.
I mean, she is such a delight of a person that you're like, after so many years of living life, you're like, I see the attraction. I like this person.
Yeah.
This person is really cool.
And she has the energy to take on Bill Murray. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of this film, like when we get to the film, like, you have three characters who get to do a lot of improv: Bill Murray, Andy McDowell, and we'll talk about him later, but Chris Elliott.
Yeah.
But everybody else painstakingly has to stick, not just to the script, but like when the character Ned, he has to land on the same brick every single time, because this is every day repeating itself. So everyone does the exact same thing. There's a lot of rigor here mixed in with improv. So Andy McDowell, she was great as a straight person. She was happy to sign on and not feel like overshadowed. Like, for a woman who's had all these credits and all these nominations and done all this great stuff.
Yeah.
She didn't feel like she was being misused by being the straight person. She didn't feel like that was like she was competing for screen time with Bill Murray. She actually took on the challenge of being the reactor. I have to react to everything Bill Murray does, and not off the script, because she says every scene she did with Bill Murray she learned from, but every take was different. Like, Bill Murray never did the same thing twice,
I mean, and that's good too, because it's like that also gives you a wide range of takes to pick from
Yeah.
to help better craft the movie. You're like, oh no, I like the way he said it like that, because that actually kind of pushes the story this way a little bit more.
You say his name better. The Stephen
Tobolowsky.
Stephen Tobolowsky, who plays Ned.
Ned Ryerson, I dated your sister Mary Pat a couple times till you told me not to anymore.
He talks about, and I don't know if the whole movie was shot this way, but he talks about when he did his scenes with Bill Murray, they had to shoot everything. They shot all the scenes. So I think they shoot 9 scenes and only 5 end up in the movie.
Yeah.
But they shot them on sunny days, on snowy days, on rainy days, on days with sleet, and on gloomy, overcast days. Every single take, everything over and over. Because you were trying to make a movie that everything happens on one day, and you're making the movie from winter to spring. Because when you make a movie, you don't make the whole movie in one day. It takes, you're anywhere from like a month and a half to 2.5 months filming this. So Harold Ramis wasn't sure if the final movie was going to be a snowy day, a sunny day, a rainy day, because you don't know what kind of weather you're going to get over the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
There was a quote that I really liked. There's a moment that I think they wrote into later scripts, like Harold Ramis. I think he wrote it in, when Bill Murray comes out of his room and he grabs that guy by the chest and slams him up against the wall and goes,
"Don't mess with me, pork chop."
Yeah.
Right. I think Danny was wondering if Bill Murray could get away with doing something like that, coming from comedy and everything. It's like, could he pull something like that off and be lovable and everything? And Harold Ramis said, Bill can do this. He knows how to be charming and nasty at the same time.
I really do think.
And it's like that to me, like hearing him say, like I could hear him saying that in my mind. And I'm like, that is Bill, from everything I know about Bill Murray, that is Bill Murray to a T.
And I have to say, when I saw the trailer for this film, I thought it was going to be awful.
I watched it the other day. Yeah.
I did not watch this movie in theaters. This was a movie I watched on VHS later on.
Yeah.
Because to me, this felt like he had just done Quick Change before that. This could have been Operation Dumbo Drop. It felt like a generic, like when I saw the trailer, I was not, when I saw the movie though, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, Bill Murray deserves an Oscar. And this was definitely a time before we were giving Oscars to comedy, which we still kind of don't. Like they have a comedy dance, section now, but they don't, because this movie is, Bill Murray is, I don't think, because here's the thing that we know about cinema. We know a really good dramatic actor, they're not good with comedy.
Yeah.
Like you can't fake comedy. You either are funny or you aren't, and you can bring it or you don't. We also know that not all comedians can do drama.
No,
but a lot can.
I feel like comedians are actually way better equipped at doing drama though, only in the fact that they have to take the things that are real and sad and make them into jokes.
And I do agree. I think no one listens better than a comedian, if for anything, so they have something to work off of. And I also do think most comedians, the reason why a lot of comedians, like people say they're darker, is I think there's a certain sensitivity that then allows them to even tune in to know how to make a joke about something. Because what comedy does is it takes a horrible situation and finds some light in it. And only someone paying attention,
right.
Is
it tragedy plus timing?
There's so much tension and pain and misery and craziness here. And that's the first part of comedy. But see, you got to get some distance from it. You know what I mean? That the thing to remember about comedy is if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny. So you got to get back from the pain. You see what I mean? But like they said, they asked me up in at Harvard. A bunch of kids asked me, "What's comedy?" So I said, and then this is part of what I'm trying to say about getting back from it. I said, comedy is tragedy plus time. Tragedy plus time. See, when the night Lincoln was shot, you couldn't joke about it. You couldn't make a joke about that. You just couldn't do it. Now time has gone by, and now it's fair game.
I do want to say, while we're gushing over Andie MacDowell, who is a model, she's not the only model in this film. We have the handsome boy modeling school graduate himself, Chris Elliott.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Chris Elliott also brings a lot to Larry that was never on the page.
Yeah. See, so had Cabin Boy already come out by now?
No, Cabin Boy hadn't come out. He had just done, Cabin Boy comes out the next year. And right before this, he had done CB4.
Yeah.
So, and he'd also done, he'd also been on the Letterman show from 82 to 88,
Yeah.
And just lots of cameos everywhere.
And he had not gotten his own Fox show yet.
Yeah, no, he had Get a Life.
Because was he in like season 1 of Get a Life?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that was a good show.
Like
And-
if I would have actually done the note card with everything that he'd been up until this point,
Yeah.
it was a lot of TV cameo, like a lot of
And my thing about it though is the fact that I knew him enough to know how funny he could be, and even though he's very good in this movie, I honestly think they are holding him back more.
Yeah.
Than he could have added so much more.
Yeah.
Because it's like he has those moments where he's funny and he goes, did he just call himself the talent? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's funny. Or when he looks down in the ravine and he goes, hey, he might be okay. Boom. Oh, well, maybe not now.
Yeah.
But those are good. But it's like you're looking at this guy and you're like, there is so much more in him.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't get out. And the problem is Larry's not given a lot.
That's true.
So it's like, it's not, it's like he was handed more. I'm sure he would have done more.
But yeah, like I think originally Danny had imagined Larry as, because again, when Danny Rubin wrote this, he was in his 20s, his mid 20s, late 20s. And so for him, everybody in the world, when you're that age and you're working in TV and other stuff, everyone's older around you.
Yeah.
So for him, he was thinking of the cameraman as like some old out of shape camera guy who wants to do as little work as possible.
Yeah.
But because we have Bill Murray, who's kind of like going through his sort of midlife crisis here, everyone around him is younger. Like Bill Murray's frustrated in his career because at this age, why am I still on a local station?
Yeah. And that compared to the first pass of the script, I'm glad you brought this up because this is different. And I think it's a good different, because I think the problem with writing a character at like 28 and having them go through this cycle of life, thousands of years, having to face their demons and their I can't come up with a word right now, but like their regrets, and how they've treated people.
You're already playing a little in stereotype. You're already thinking about what you might do when you're old, but you're not there yet.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. Is at 28, I can tell you that like I haven't racked up nearly as much sin at 28 as I did at 45.
And this is where I think Harold Ramis brings a balance to it, because Harold Ramis looks at this more as like the small things. Like there's small battles. Like like when you're 28, everything's a big battle.
Yeah.
When you're 40, 45, there's smaller battles. And you're trying to just tread water before the next phase. And I think that's what he has Bill Murray doing. And I think that's what he brings to the script, is like he takes all these things and he turns it more into like, just these everyday annoyances.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because because they kind of changed his age, they were able to do something different that I think paid off better with Phil when he had to go through all of these years of facing himself. Because first of all, there was more to face. And second of all, making him a person who is older, who's still the local weatherman, who he's been aspiring to more, it makes actual sense that he feels like he's in this purgatory. So when he actually gets into purgatory, there's a rhyme and a reason there.
Yeah.
And when you have Danny write the first script and this guy's 28, it clearly is established by Rita. This is his first on camera moment.
First on camera moment. He's like a young cocky guy who thinks he deserves the world.
So he's not
versus
really
a 45-year-old
anything.
guy who deserves the world, hasn't acknowledged what he
And so it's like when you have like Rita sitting at the table and Phil's got all that pastry around him and he's chain smoking and he's just drinking the coffee right out of the pot.
Yeah.
And she's just like, I'm watching a man having a midlife crisis right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is a great payoff. This is his 4th year of doing the same dumb thing he doesn't want to do. And he's already stuck. Phil's already stuck in his life before he even gets stuck in the timeline.
Well, and here's some things where I think it helps change the script. Because like in the script, a younger Phil meets up with the priest and is trying to explain to the priest, but the priest is looking at Phil as a 28-year-old kid who still has the world ahead of him.
Yeah.
So he's saying, the priest is like, yeah, every day feels the same every day, because the priest is an older gentleman. An older gentleman's like, yes, like once you fall into life and you're settled, every day does feel the same. Every day does feel like it's repeating.
Well, and to go further into that too, to add that second layer, Phil is feeling at this point in the script, he's feeling incredibly lonely because no one knows what he's going through.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's the repetitive nature of everything, plus the fact that he's saying, I'm so isolated. I'm so lonely.
But
nobody understands.
But a 28-year-old guy who, that's the time in life when you're actually out in the world and you have a lot of friends and you're doing a lot of things, talking to like, you know, a 50, 60-year-old priest.
Yeah.
Who is now in that, when you get older and you do feel lonely, you've started a family, you've branched off.
Who on top of that is hearing people confessing their problems over and over and over again.
Harold Ramis changes it to, and again, there is a version of a shrink, and Danny Rubin did have a version of Phil going to see a shrink.
Yeah.
But in Danny's version, you're in the hotel lobby. We're tight in on Phil complaining about the loop. You think he's talking to a shrink, but then as the camera pans out, he's just talking to another guest at the hotel.
Yeah, which I do find very funny.
That is funny. But Harold Ramis finds the frustration of a midlife guy, an older guy going to a shrink, because he goes to a novice, a guy who's like,
I have an alcoholic now.
Yeah. And so what we have Phil explaining, I've lived the same day over and over. I'm frustrated. Like, am I going crazy? What's going on? And this young and experienced shrink is like, well, maybe we should see each other more. Okay.
Yeah.
How's tomorrow? And Bill Murray puts the pillow over his head and starts punching his head. Because who's listening? No one's listening to me.
And I'm hoping because I keep getting sound coming in and out of this. I'm hoping it's my headset and not my actual mic dropping. We might have to do this again.
This will be the
Great. I have to record this all over again.
That'll be awesome.
No, but in that scene where he goes to the priest, that was Danny's original attempt at moving Phil to start reaching out to the homeless around the town. And that was interesting because in the movie, they isolate it to just that one gentleman.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because you really can't have him get too far afield.
This isn't Scrooge. He's not going downtown to that whole cast.
Right. So it's like, you just need the one gentleman, and I think that worked really well. But in his original script, it was like, okay, well, how can we get Phil to start being more motivated to like going to like sort of the ne'er-do-well people of the town, which there were a few. And then he started talking to them, and like those people started having these illusions of like, oh yeah, no, I've been here 1,000 years, you know. And he went to the lady in the nursing home, and she was like 2,600 years old.
Yeah.
And the way it reads, you're like, is this metaphor? Are these people also stuck in a time loop?
Yeah.
It never really gets clear on it.
It starts to get a little marshy.
And I'm glad they peeled that out and got rid of it.
And instead, Phil's in his midlife crisis downtown. What do you do late at night? You're in a bar with two other guys. And Phil, you could probably say this better than I can. Phil's talking to the guys.
Well, yeah. So he's with Ralph and Gus. Early on in the script that he had written, he's talking to these guys in the same way, but this is at a later point in the movie. But Ralph had said that if he had one day to live, he wanted to drive around hitting mailboxes and running over cops.
Yeah.
Super weird. And so now he's got, you know, our man Rick Ducommun, Gus, and he's got the Drake.
The Drake from
Andy
Seinfeld.
told me. So Ralph is played by the Drake from Seinfeld, but man, I cannot tell under that beard. That's wild.
Yeah, Rick Everton.
Yeah. And so we have these guys sitting there, and Phil's talking about his life, and you know, Rick Ducommun does that thing where he goes,
you know, some guys would look at this glass and they would say, you know, that glass is half empty. Other guys would say, that glass is half full. I think you was a glass is half empty kind of guy, am I right?
What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered?
No, that sums it up for me.
Right?
You know, like two townies in their 40s are like, yeah.
We
relate.
And it's funny, like the way he's saying it, the way it's staged is really great because you have Rick Ducommun has got this orange kind of reddish nose already going.
Yeah.
And they're just both like their shoulders are low And so you have super out of touch Phil just rambling off. And it's like, even at 13, I was getting the joke already because they staged it perfectly.
Yeah, and then when it comes to helping people, the script instead, because we turned it into it's turned into a romantic comedy. Rita fills the place of the priest and other people. Instead of him having to find exterior people that are going to help him how to be better, it's Rita. It's all the scenes he has with Rita over the course of the time that he starts realizing, like, oh, maybe I should go learn how to play the piano, or maybe I should try to learn poetry more than just for picking up somebody. I don't know if it comes through as well in the script.
Yeah.
But I do see where he's trying to go with this person self-actualizing themselves. But a romantic comedy is, she makes me want to be a better person.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell that. So Rita is sort of the motivation for a big portion of this, because it's sort of like every time Phil does something wrong or Phil isn't measuring up to what Rita thinks is right for a person, you know, he's confronted with that and realizes he has to go make another change. So she's sort of his moralistic mirror.
And then we do get, I think in the movie, we do get the senses as he's making those changes, that's what's bringing the enlightenment to, instead of wanting to pretend like there's a great scene where they're making a snowman.
Yeah.
And they have a snowball fight with the kids and they fall into they fall into the snow. And the first time they fall into the snow, it's a romantic moment. They kiss and it's like really great.
Yeah.
But then when they replay it again later, you see Bill Murray like trying to wrestle around to find the right spot, as if that's going to make it romantic again. And it just falls flat because it's like, he's still playing a game on what she thinks love will be.
Yeah.
It's not till later on when he's gone through all this experience. It's no longer like I'm hitting on you or playing a game. It's just there.
It's Phil being Phil.
Yeah.
And you hear that a lot. Actually, that's one of those things that people talk about a lot, which I think is probably true. When people are on their purpose, right? People talk about this a lot, being on your purpose. And when people are on their purpose and doing their thing and doing the things that motivate them and make them happy, other people see that and want to be part of that.
Yeah.
He became a person that other people want to be around. And instead of being a person that is selfish and terrible, that people try to avoid as much as possible. And bringing that up, I really love that moment you were talking about when Andy McDowell falls for the first time and she's like, help me up. That, I don't know how many takes they did of that, but that might now stand as my favorite moment from the entire movie.
Yeah.
Because she has a laugh in there that is just dynamite. It's so perfect. Like, her smile is genuine. Her laugh is warm. When Phil falls down and they're laughing together, like, that must have been just a 1 in a million shot.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Just getting swept away in the scene.
Yeah. It was really good.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember a scene like that specifically written in the original script. That was probably a really good play around.
And just to stress, everything that we see in the movie isn't like Danny wrote a script and then Harold Ramis made it better. Harold Ramis, I think, is a great director because he comes from Second City, because he comes from the Lampoon.
Yeah.
He knows how to collaborate with people. He knows how to nudge an actor in a certain way and then get out of the way. He's all about collaboration. And I think together, like, because he kept Danny Rubin on the entire time.
Yeah.
Danny Rubin's,
which a lot of people don't do.
A lot of people in Hollywood, they buy your script
that.
and then buy.
Yeah.
And so, there would be times where Harold Ramis is writing a scene and Danny goes off and writes a scene, and then they come back and sometimes they use Danny's, sometimes they use Harold's.
That was really funny when he was talking about he would rewrite. Danny would rewrite a scene, give it to Harold. Harold would rewrite it the way he wanted it, and then send it back.
Yeah.
And that would happen multiple times. Like,
yeah.
He was just like, no, we're just not going to do it.
But I do think the genius of Harold Ramis is he's looking for what works best for the film.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of ego there per se.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with Bill Murray, even though I guess there was like a whole fight between them, after 6 movies and a great career together.
Yeah.
I really do look at this film as a love letter to Bill Murray because Harold Ramis knew this collaboration. Like he knew once he saw the script, it's like what you said about with Danny, where with Danny Rubin when he was telling him, Bill Murray's the kind of guy who can charm you and
be nasty at the
same time. And so I think Harold Ramis really knew what Bill Murray could do here. And again, I think this is a film Bill Murray deserves an Oscar if you went back in time because it's every scene he has to carry. At every scene, he's the one who has to set the tone.
Yeah.
Where are we in the script? Are we happy? Are we sad? Where are we enlightened? Where are we not? And so, I mean, there's stories of Bill Murray on set where it would take, 1 or 2 PAs to really try to get him out of the trailer and to come back to set. But while some people were upset by that, Harold Ramis, who got irritated because they were trying to make a movie, Harold Ramis says like Bill Murray he gives like 100%, 110%. So when he's done with the scene, he is exhausted, and so it wasn't something that Bill Murray always seems so seamless, like it just happens.
Yeah,
but like Andy McDowell says, no one take was ever the same. Bill Murray is throwing out every scenario. You could say the guy's going through Groundhog's Day himself. He's redoing. Because he's redoing a million takes. He's redoing it in the sun, in the rain, in the snow.
And then he's trying to add on his own little Bill Murray-isms in each one.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was he's throwing cards into the hat.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was straight up him. I think there was very little on the page for that.
Like Stephen
Tobolowsky.
Tobolowsky says, there's, because we both agree, if you've read the original script, everything Stephen Tobolowsky says is written.
Pretty much everything is the same.
But what he did was he elevated. He played it big. And when he came in for the audition, he even told them, I've been reading this puppy overnight over and over. I'm gonna go really big, and if you guys don't like it, just throw me out of the room. But he adds all that little punching, all that little like bing.
The bings are his, I think.
Bing!
Or the bings might have been in the script, but the energy he brings is him.
Bing again!
And there's a funny story he tells about that, like about how he was on a shoot with Kurt Fuller, who was in Ghostbusters 2.
Yes,
kind of like the assistant mayor.
He's the assistant to the mayor who gets the Ghostbusters locked up in the asylum.
And so they both didn't know they were both auditioning for the same role. They were away on another shoot. And Kurt asked Steven like, "Hey, what do you got coming up after this?" And Steven
Stephen Tobolowsky.
Ned is pretty much like, other actors don't want to hear about other roles you've already booked or that you got going. So he's like, "Oh, not much." And so Kurt Fuller says, "Oh, I'm really good friends with Harold Ramis. He's making this movie Groundhog's Day. I'm going to play this character Ned." So Steven's like, "Oh my God." And Steven's head's like, "I'm going back for a callback for that movie.
Yeah.
Did they really already cast it?" So then Steven goes back and does the high energy.
Yeah.
So then later on, Kurt and Steven are in the same car coming back from their other shoot when Steven and apparently Kurt both find out that Steven got the role.
Oh God.
Just two actors, Oof. And Kurt was so hurt by this that Kurt goes to the screening with Stephen Tobolowsky and Harold Ramis, who he knows. He's like, "All right, let's see how well you did in the part that was mine." But then afterwards, he goes, "You know what? You did a really great job. I couldn't see anyone else." It gives a hug. Stephen Tobolowsky talks about how that was like really,
I don't think Kurt could have done it.
Yeah, I don't think
not in the version they made.
Yeah, but so while Stephen Tobolowsky talks about how there was no time for improv. Like, he got to bring that energy, but he had to read everything by the script.
Yeah.
He even talks about how in that scene, he had to land on the brick every single time.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
And there was a PA. It was a guy, PA's very first job was to make sure where you land on the brick.
Yeah.
And Stephen Tobolowsky talks about how always be kind to the PA, because that PA turned out to be a producer on the show Silicon Valley. So it was his boss later on down the road.
Whoa.
But there was one part in the movie, at the very end of the movie, when Stephen Tobolowsky, when Phil's finally nice to Ned.
Yeah.
What had happened is they liked when they were looking at dailies, they liked what Ned was doing so much, they decided to bring him back for the big party.
Yeah, at the very end.
But Bill Murray joked to him, you know what? They brought you back for a week of craft service. Like, we're so busy and not, So Steven gets a little panicky. He goes back to his room. He writes that scene of like, Phil bought this, Phil bought that, Phil. And he's like, I wrote the scene, so I had the most lines, but I made sure to save the joke for Bill. So towards the end of the shoot, when they're going to send him home, because they're like, yeah, we're running out of time. Maybe we don't need you for anything else. He's like, I did write a scene. They show it to Harold Ramis. They show it to Bill Murray. Bill's like, you know what? We could do it, but one take. I only want one take. And I think that shows, I think that shows how exhausted Bill Murray was making this movie, because everything was multiple takes of the same thing. And he was playing it different every time, that by the time he read this scene, he's like, if you can hit it in one, like, we got it.
And where are you going to dinner? Let's not spoil it.
So my last Stephen Tobolowsky, he's the guy who named the band Radiohead.
Shut up.
So
really,
back in the 80s, when he was one of the co-writers on David Byrne's True Stories.
Okay.
And while they were writing the movie together, like Stephen Tobolowsky was talking about how, that he has these psychic abilities and he can figure. And in the process of just shooting the shit while you're writing a movie, like, it inspired David Byrne to write a song for the movie called Radiohead.
Yeah.
The band then saw that in the movie and decided to name their band after that song.
Oh my gosh.
So this guy, Ned gave us a lot.
The sound of a brand new world.
To close out Ned, well within to the original script, the character of Phil would punch Ned in the face every single day before you even got to know who he was. And it wasn't till I think 100 years maybe or something into the script that he was in this kind of charitable phase that he finally stopped.
And doesn't even know why he doesn't like Ned anymore.
He doesn't remember who Ned was. He doesn't remember why he doesn't like him. He doesn't even remember why he punches him in the face. It's just that he wants to. That's all he knows, is that he has this need to do it. And so then he stops and he hears all that Ned has to say, and then he goes right back to punching him in the face.
Yeah. But I think what they developed in the movie, which I think is better than the script, is Ned becomes like a plot device or an activity device, like where Bill Murray at first is confused. First you have the scene and it's just like, okay. The next day Bill Murray's like, oh, not this again.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point when Bill Murray's decided, like, you know what? I can drive off a cliff. There's no consequences. Why don't I just punch this insurance salesman? Why? And then it becomes funny because we're through the movie, we're learning there's no consequences. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And
what I like the way that Danny had reasoned why Phil kept punching him, even though he'd become enlightened, is because no matter how enlightened Phil gets, humans are human.
Yeah.
And there are human qualities that are hard to transcend. And sometimes you just want to punch a guy in his mouth.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that reasoning, that there are certain qualities that Phil is never going to reason himself out of, because it's innate to human nature.
But instead in the movie, what we have, and what I think works really well, is like when Phil becomes so enlightened and just decides to have a great day just to have a great day.
Yeah.
By buying that insurance, he also gives Ned the greatest day of Ned's life. Ned can't believe this guy he used to know bought everything.
Yeah.
And so again, he just helps the story move along.
Yeah. For the kind of movie they were trying to make.
Yeah.
I think it is exactly the way it should have played out. If you were going to make that darker, Charlie Kaufman-esque film, you would have him go back to punching people and just going, you know what? You'd have a voiceover say, sometimes human nature is human nature, sometimes you just got to punch a guy no matter how smart you become.
Phil? Hey, Phil Connors.
Ned?
This movie growing up, and if you go on YouTube, you'll find, the meaning of Groundhog's Day is this, and the meaning of Groundhog's Day is that. And it was always this great sort of oral history until YouTube came around and until the internet came around. and we were able to sort of solidify some of these facts. And still these strange ideas persist about what the movie is about.
Yeah.
Even though you can watch multiple interviews
The
with
writer,
people who
the
made
director,
movie.
the actor himself can
And
tell you none of this was.
they'll tell you exactly what the movie is about or what they were thinking when they wrote X, Y, and Z. And so you have people saying, oh, this movie is about reincarnation. This movie is about, transcending, human want. And then there's some other things that are just really funny that people had brought up about the movie and theories about the film that I kind of like. And the more you watch it, the more you can kind of see, okay, yeah, this kind of plays and maybe this is true. And if you ignore exactly what you're being told that the movie is, kind of like I akin it to oh man, I'm trying to think of the movie. Oh, I akin it to Donnie Darko, where you're like, what is this movie about? And you find out that the director's cut of the movie is really the cut you have to watch for the movie to make sense, because the theatrical cut had so many things taken out of it. It truly can't make sense. And then there's also a lot of people have their own interpretations of the movie despite, whatever the director said. And so I feel like this is the same thing. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes. And with Ned, there is a persistent belief in the Reddit community that Ned Ryerson is the devil. And I really like this idea. It explains how a person can be so toxically cheery.
Yeah. Watch that last step. It's a doozy.
Yeah. Where he can come up and he can just blast a person with this annoying positivity. And there's a couple of things that I was watching it last night. People were referencing like, oh, well, when Ned's on screen, there's like red in the background, and there's like a red flag, like literally a red flag. I don't think it's anything, because he walks a couple of feet and there's a blue flag pointing at him too. So I'm like, well, that's nothing. So I don't think red has anything to do with it. And obviously I don't think that this theory really holds water, but if they had kept what Ned had said from the original script, I would say that this is almost more likely.
There he is. Ned Ryerson ran against me for class president and won. Bing. Ned Ryerson whipped my fanny on the 3-mile cross-country state meet. Bing. Bing again. Ned Ryerson took Judy Allen Smith to the homecoming dance against your better judgment and that of her father, I might add. I wonder if Amazon Audible is hiring.
If you were the devil and you were going to put somebody in a hell, wouldn't you come at them with all these sort of bitter things that you were better than this other person, or this other person had bettered you at, or what have you? And so it's a fun theory. And there's a couple of things that I was thinking about the other night myself that I was like, okay, here's something that nobody talked about. When he walks up and he says, Phil, he goes, don't tell me you don't remember me, because I sure as heck fire remember you. Right? I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase. And then later he's walking with Bill, he's walking with Phil and Bill. He's walking with them both. And he says, when I see opportunity, I run at it like a bull. But he makes the sign of the devil. He puts his fingers out and he puts his thumb out. And he puts his two middle fingers back. And he goes, like a bull, I charge at it like a bull. And he's doing the devil horns when he says that. And it's like, usually when people do, hey man, don't mess with the bull, you'll get the horns, you put your thumb underneath and you just put your two fingers out. So I was like, okay, interesting. But yeah, as far as a theory goes, I don't think it, again, really holds a lot of water, because in the end, I'm sorry.
Because the end of the theory is how you break the loop. The theory
is how he broke the loop is
by being nice.
He was nice, and so the devil let him out of the loop. But the other is that Phil bought all of that insurance as a way of selling his soul to get out of the loop.
Signed on the dotted line.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right. There is fun here.
Yeah.
I think simple scrutiny would say otherwise to this theory, but I do like the idea of it. One of the other ones that is fun is that Punxsutawney itself is in purgatory. Like something about the town, not just Phil, has caused this time loop, and the entire town needs to be elevated. And Phil just happens to be the catalyst of this elevation. Like, but that the town itself needs to be different. Like you have that couple that's like, I don't know if we should get married,
Yeah.
you know?
WrestleMania tickets.
Right. You have Buster, who was gonna die because he didn't chew his food.
Yeah.
Right? The kid was gonna fall out of the tree and probably be paralyzed or die.
Yep.
You know, there's so many things that happen in the town.
Those old ladies would have been stuck waiting for somebody to like bring them a new tire.
Right, exactly. And who knows where they were going to end up that was going to cause a chain of events. And so there is some sort of argument that could be made that entire town needed saving.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't Phil suffering. It's Phil getting to be the person who remembers every day so that he can get these people out of it, because the people themselves don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was an interesting theory. And honestly, I think it still holds a certain amount of water, because by the end, there are so many changes and so many people get saved and so much happiness happens that it's totally feasible that that's still what's going on.
Well, and I like the other theory, which is like what a lot of religions and Buddhists and atheists and Nietzsche and everybody hopped onto, is that Phil has the same day every single day, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. And by the end of the day, by the end of the movie, he has the perfect day.
Yeah.
The only thing that changes in all of those scenarios and all of those hundreds of days, tens of days, thousands of days was Phil. So any day of your life could be your worst day or your best day, depending on the attitude you bring to it in that moment.
Yeah. And what a great positive thing to bring up. Every single day he took a different tact, and the day either got better or far worse.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is.
And the day he chooses to engage with everybody,
yeah,
the day he puts himself out there, for him is like the perfect day, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that we all get stuck in that too. I mean, Phil got thousands of years to develop that selflessness because he got perspective that we aren't allowed. That's the thing, is that was the real gift that he got, not living for that long, but being granted the gift of perspective, you know, and feeling it, not just being told it, because you can't tell somebody something. He has to feel it.
And that was the high note. That's the high note the film leaves us on, is Rita makes him want to be a better person. He goes through all this and he finally has the perfect day, you know, and the next morning he wakes up and the rest of his life is ahead of him.
Yeah.
That's where the movie leaves us. Where's the script leave us?
Yeah. So in this script, this beautiful, dark, tragic script, Phil finally ends up getting together with Rita, and, you know, they go back to his place, and everything plays out somewhat the same as far as the next day happening. The next day finally occurs, but the moment he and Rita wake up, Rita has had a drastic shift in her attitude. I mean, her entire persona changes. And at that moment, the voiceover switches to Rita. The main focus is now Rita. Rita's our main character. And you find out that she has been living the same February 3rd over and over and over again for over 100 years, I think she says.
She's like, every day she wakes up and Phil Connors is in bed with she's in bed with Phil Connors. And that's how her day starts every day for 100 years.
Yes. And she is just over it. And so I think she says to him, like, I got to get out of here. And she just walks away from Phil. And it's a complete counter romantic moment, because he has gotten out of his loop, and the way he speaks to her, he almost seems like he's forgotten he'd been in the loop.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, well, we just got here yesterday.
The only thing the only thing he does in the morning, he goes downstairs to look at the books or something. Just to reconfirm that it wasn't a dream. So he does
Yes.
know he's lived this over and over, but he's now snapped out of it and he's ready for the next day to happen.
It is really weird because it's like the moment he gets to February 3rd, it almost feels like he doesn't remember living that in the entire time. Like he's still changed.
Yeah.
But he just, all of that previous 1,000 years is like over. And now he's like, yeah, yesterday was Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
And now it's the next day.
Yeah. Like he remembers it. He remembers he's gone through it, but in his memory, he did all of that for her.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't, like, he remembers it. He's did it all for her. He even expresses that he's been dreaming and doing all this stuff and reliving the same day for her. And he doesn't understand why she's not receptive. Why wasn't she like she was last night?
Yeah.
And we find out, well, because she's been.
Yeah, because she's been waking
started
up
every morning this
every
way.
single day with him, and obviously the relationship has gotten very strained from her point of view. But I also think it's interesting that because she says out loud, like, this is, blah, blah, blah. That was like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's strange that Phil doesn't go, what do you mean? And have her go like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like he doesn't seem to understand.
That's the part that is the part that I was a little confused.
She's in a loop now.
Like even though we know he knows that this is the first day he's out of the loop and he's happy about it, he doesn't see like just himself just going through it. He doesn't seem to talk to her about, well, I went through this. Explain to me what you're going like.
Yeah, it's like we get
there
the
is
joke.
A disconnect there.
It's like a Twilight Zone gotcha turnaround ending. What a twist!
And the twist ending again in 1999 when things were started getting darker in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like I could have saw this movie panning out that way and going in the way of Fight Club and like some of those other
yeah.
But yeah, 1993.
It just wasn't. It wasn't there. It wasn't the right movie. It wasn't the right time.
Yeah.
And so the final theory that is mine and mine alone, and I don't have a lot. This is very thin, but I want everyone to go back and watch this movie. And when Phil comes in and he does the whole shtick about like, so what are the chances of getting out today? And she's like, oh well, he's got to fix the van. And he's like, oh, well, can I get you a drink? And they sweet vermouth, they do the whole bit, right? And he gets real gaudy with it.
It always makes me think of Rome, the way the sun hits the buildings in the afternoon.
Watch the bartender the entire time, because there is a moment where the bartender is listening to Phil, and it's played two ways, and I like the second way better. That Phil is giving that little speech about, oh, I'd like to say a prayer and,
yeah, I like to toast a world peace.
Yeah,
and say a little prayer.
I'd like to say a prayer and toast a world peace.
And they toast a world peace. And then as she drinks, he still says his little prayer. Amen.
Yes. And right about that moment, for no reason, it cuts to the bartender again, and he's washing a glass. And he just shakes his head.
Like he's heard this
going,
before.
What a bunch of bullshit. And that even in, I think like probably when I rented it for the second or third time, that struck me as so odd.
Buy it, Matt. You don't rent it. You buy.
That's true. But I got it. Yeah. Cause it was probably like $5 at Target at that point. No, but watching that, I'm like, why did they cut back to the bartender? Because up until that point, he had just come up to them and said, "And for you, miss, that's it." Well, and for you, miss.
What I find funny about that scene is because when you see that scene before you watch the rest of the movie, when you get to that scene,
yeah,
for a split second, you're like, "Is he in on this? Does he know? Is there some supernatural like?"
That's what I think.
But then later in the movie, when Chris Elliott's having a drink with Nancy. And Chris Elliott is trying to smooth talk Nancy. We get that exact same shot. The bartender with the glass, and he looks over and he shakes his head.
Yeah.
So then you kind of get the sense, okay, maybe it's not just Phil specific. It's this bartender. Here's old dudes doing this all the time.
No, and that's why I said it played two ways, because one, it could absolutely be just this is what he sees all the time from dudes just trying to come in here and slay on chicks.
Like what kind of game is
but
that?
I like to think that this dude is an observer.
Yeah.
Right? That he's one of the, what is it? The Marvel's watchers.
The
He watches.
Twilight Zone, he'd be like the referee, like, or not the referee, but yeah.
He's there to observe.
The line
And
ref.
What
like-
a better person than a bartender, right?
I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities.
My theory, Harold Ramis has known Bill Murray since Bill Murray was like, like just getting on Second City.
Yeah.
In fact, Bill Murray's older brother, who's in the film, plays the mayor,
Brian Doyle Murray,
like, was one of the big Second City guys. Bill Murray was just a little brother who showed up. So, Harold Ramis is about 6 years older than Bill Murray and has seen Bill Murray go from like your buddy's younger brother to like just one of the biggest stars in the world.
Yeah.
They've done 6 movies together and Bill Murray has just killed in all of them. And so there's a part of me, and it's like, I don't even know if Harold Ramis knows he did this, but there is a part of me that I think Harold Ramis is like, I've observed Bill Murray do so many things. Because Bill Murray used to like, he would just like pretend to get hit by cars in traffic and make people laugh. We've seen, he shows up at people's parties, at weddings, like he just shows up nowhere and everybody loves him.
Yeah.
Everybody, and
he's charming.
He's charming. While he can also be, like
volatile.
Yeah. And I think Harold Ramis, when he saw this script and he thought Bill Murray was perfect for the role, I have a little theory where I think Harold Ramis is like, I've seen Bill Murray get away with so much over the years. Like, it's almost as if Bill Murray walks into every like anything that a normal person would do and just kill the mood of the party or offend people, Bill Murray always gets away with. Bill Murray's like one of the only people in the world who could insult you and you're happy about it, or who could do all consistently. And I think there's a part of Harold Ramis that's like, I think in Harold Ramis's head, he's like, I think Bill Murray gets to play the scene out 100 times till it's right, and that's when he shows up into a room. And somehow I think Harold Ramis thinks the universe is somehow on Bill Murray's side, that this entire movie, Bill Murray having to play the same day over and over and over, is the universe as the ultimate wingman. We will do this day as long as it takes till you get the girl.
Yeah.
Like, and only in Bill Murray's world would that make sense. For no one else gets a second shot, but Bill Murray seems to always, it always works out for Bill Murray. Bill Murray doesn't have an agent.
Yeah.
But people have to track down Bill Murray. He used to have an answer machine that you would call. Like, any other actor would cease to work, or their careers would not go so well if they pulled that stunt. But Bill Murray gets away with it.
So it's like, you think that when they're writing, right, Harold Ramis is not writing for what Phil would do. He's writing for what Bill would do.
I think so.
And he's like, this is my friend Bill trapped in time.
Yeah, well, because it's like, I mean, everyone has that buddy or that friend who seems to just, wherever they go, people like them, or whatever they do, they never get in trouble. They always get out of the situation. Like, it's, I
like to think that I'm that friend.
Yeah,
to you.
That friend where it always just works out. And I think Harold Ramis over the years has just seen Bill Murray as like, this is a guy, Bill Murray, after then Ghostbusters, he takes off for a little while to move to France with his family, and then still comes back to a career. Bill Murray can have a few flops and then still come back. When this movie was made, the last movie Harold Ramis had made was 1986, Club Paradise.
Yeah,
the movie bombs.
Movie Club Paradise.
I think Harold Ramis ends up in director jail for a while. So this was a chance, and I think Harold Ramis had got, between Animal House, Caddyshack, Stripes, Ghostbusters, he had never won over the critics. The critics always just thought of him as some sophomoric actor writer who happens to get to direct. He was looking to be taken more serious. So I think when he saw this movie, he saw this as, this is a chance for me to show Bill Murray in a different light. This is a chance for me to make a movie that's a little bit more serious and has all these other undertones. But I do think in the world of Bill Murray, as deep and thoughtful as they're trying to make this movie, you come out of it being like, the universe just acquiesces to Bill. Like, the universe is like, we will do this day over and over and over until Bill gets the girl.
I was not satisfied with that day again.
Yeah.
They're like, okay.
But no, Harold Ramis walks away from this movie and he goes and makes Analyze This, Analyze That, Bedazzled. Like, he gets like a slew of, I mean, unfortunately though, the first movie Harold Ramis does after this, right out of the gate, is he makes like it's like a $12 or $13 million Stewart from
Oh yeah.
and it makes like $900,000. Like
Oof.
so at a point you almost were like, oh no, is he getting put back in director jail?
Yeah.
But then they analyze that movies, they do well, and he does, he has.
Yeah, and as some numbers on this movie, I was looking it up, and so this had a budget of about 14.6 million.
14 to 30 million.
14 to 30?
Yeah, so I think when some of these, what happens in some of these numbers is you have a production number. So I think the production budget was closer to 14.6. I think the reason they go between 14 and 30 is no one quite knows how much, like, some of the actors or directors making.
Okay, well, let's pretend that it's 14.6 just because that's what the internet told me.
Let's call
so
it
that's what I
28
know.
million.
Okay, well, so in the opening weekend, it made back that 14.6. Like, how great is that? What a sigh of relief.
After Club Paradise.
Yeah, no doubt. And then...
And for Bill Murray, after a quick change.
Well, yeah, so you think about this. You think about it's a romantic comedy, and it's about a man living a day over and over again. And I think its worldwide gross ended up being 70 million.
No, it was 105 million.
Was it 105 ultimately?
Yeah. That's before VHS and other stuff.
Listen to this guy over here, just coming in. Everything I say is just saying something else. Oh, fine.
Facts matter. It's, man.
I doubt that. No, but I think because you think of that in today's dollars, basically double that.
Yeah.
For a romantic comedy, with a couple of well-known people, but for a concept that's kind of out there. And so it did amazing by all standards.
Yeah.
It did really great.
And critical acclaim. Harold Ramis really wanted to be taken serious as a director. This was the first movie, even though we love all his other movies, then they're classics. And everyone, even the critics who didn't give them the respect they deserved, I guarantee most of the critics have watched those movies over and over and over the years, whether they wanted to or not. Every channel they changed to is showing Stripes at some point, or Ghostbusters, or...
I love Stripes.
But this was the first movie where he wins over the critics.
Yeah.
In his career.
I want to end this show on a positive note, but I'm not going to. Just like Danny Rubin's script, I'm actually going to end this show on a negative note, which is I have never, not once, not never enjoyed the soundtrack to this movie. Except for the song Weatherman, which I just like as its own song. And obviously the Pennsylvania Polka, because it belongs exactly where it was.
So
I do not like this soundtrack at all.
It is not the greatest soundtrack. I do like, and this is something, I do love, the movie opens with clouds and time lapse, the passage of time. And if you notice at the very end, it ends on just still clouds, not moving.
Yeah.
I like that little touch.
I
do like the music at the beginning kind of feels a little, it starts off a little whimsical.
It's
kind
Oompa Band.
It's a little Fellini, a little,
Boom,
and then
boom, boom, boom,
it goes into minor. And then all of a sudden it feels like music when you're in Stripes and you've just crossed the border into Russia.
It did. It
absolutely. It goes from whimsical to dark.
We moved into like we're behind enemy lines in a Slavic country.
Yeah.
And I never liked that. I didn't like the song Weatherman where it was, where they've got the aerial shot and they're coming out like, I'm not saying that doesn't work in a movie. I'm saying that you're setting the wrong tone.
I know.
For this
Which is why
movie.
I think we didn't like the preview. Like I think
because the preview
used
feels
a lot of that music.
a lot of like that. And then the song at the very end, I think for the credits, I didn't like that. I don't know. They're trying to put so much cartoonishness into this movie, and it almost like it undercuts the trust of the audience.
No, I do agree with that. I
think the movie itself, the substance is great, and I'll never take that away. But I'm just listening. It's the exact opposite of the Burbs. It is the anti-Burbs, where in that movie you cannot have the Burbs without the music.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. You can't have it any other way. And this movie needs a complete musical retool, for my opinion. Also, those clouds at the beginning, I hadn't watched the movie in a long time, and I had thought it would have been very clever for those fast moving clouds to build into a dark
like storm clouds.
storm cloud, and it never happened.
No.
And I was like, well, that's an opportunity lost.
Gus Van Sant could have pulled that off, but you know.
Well, because it's like, that's the whole point, is that Phil is wrong about the storm.
Yeah.
And so the idea that the storm clouds would be building, and it's like, oh, this is foreboding, something is happening.
Yeah.
Like, I really think that would have been beautiful, but you know, whatever.
Yeah. But we love it.
I've never made a movie, so what do I know?
But we love it. We watch it every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll watch it next year and the year after that. And I guess it's fun also just to get into what goes into making these things we love. Like, you know, I mean, music, movies, you know, I had a lot of fun when we were talking about the 80s lyrics and learning about how some of those movies were some of that music was crafted.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was really fun going in and looking at where the concept for this movie started and how we got to the end and all the people that had to be involved.
When it's all about collaboration again, because there's times where, you know, they sent Danny Rubin to New York to hang out with Bill Murray, and Bill Murray would just look at some of the scenes and then be like, what if we did this instead?
Yeah.
And then just, you know, and I think Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, I think they understand people and audiences so well that I think they just knew where to take this script to make it work.
Yeah.
For that time and for the movie they were making. Because again, this movie could have worked in a few different ways, but I don't think it. Yeah.
It's strange because I walk away from this movie, having watched it again last night, still as good as I remember it. It is both a movie that transcends time and also feels exactly like a movie from 1993.
Yeah.
It's so strange because
like in a way it can feel so, in some way it feels a little 90s generic.
Yeah.
While at the same time also being, so transcending. Like,
I think the look is 90s generic, but the content of it is like evergreen.
Yeah.
And some of those lines in there, like we were talking about when Rita is so excited about all these people, and she's like, oh, these guys, they've been singing all night, and then they get too cold, they sit by the fire, and then they come out and they sing some more. And then Phil just says,
yeah, they're Hicks, Rita.
That's funny in any time. 1993, 2000, 2005, that is funny.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't seen the movie in a while, and I want to assume you have, if you're even slightly interested in this episode, go watch it again and understand that those things that you heard from your friend or whatever in the early 90s, the 2000s, those things were real. They really happened. And pick up Danny Rubin's book, How to Write Groundhog's Day. It's on Amazon for like $2.99. And it's a good read. Actually, I enjoyed reading it. He is a pretty good writer when it comes to just writing. He's an okay scriptwriter, but I liked reading the parts of the book that were just him.
Yeah, for me, the biggest tragedy is he wrote a movie in 92, 93, 94, and then he hasn't written any, or he hasn't got anything made since, to my understanding.
He went directly into Those Who Can't Do Teach.
And he was younger, so I think there's a lot of things he felt like would have been better if they would have stuck to the script. Or I think there's a lot of things where he thought I was more edgy than what, Harold Ramis wanted to do.
You had talked about earlier with me that you would wish Danny, in these subsequent interviews and everything, that he'd walked away with a better education, that he got free from from Harold Ramis, instead of thinking, oh yeah, Harold wrote it this way, I really kind of wanted it this way, and really not getting the lesson of why Harold's writing was better.
I do think the tragedy walking away from this movie is, I don't know if Danny Rubin quite got that what he thought was convention with Harold Ramis was actually like Harold Ramis had taken a scenario, and knew how to take scenarios and then let them be funny by making the whole world, like by making the rest of the movie in on its own little drama or in its little world.
Yeah.
Like the comedian becomes the disruptor. Bill Murray disrupts all those scenes.
Yeah.
And I think, because we got to think about Harold Ramis. Harold Ramis was one of the writers for Animal House. Like you have Meatballs, Caddyshack. A lot of those movies started off where it is just a conventional, like Meatballs, everybody's at camp. Everybody's in a different movie than Bill Murray. And
Yeah.
Bill Murray like disrupts the movie and makes it funny.
That is so true. Like,
you know, Animal House, you have people who are really just trying to get into the frat and all this other stuff going on. And then you have the comedians disrupting the college campus and the movie you're watching.
Yeah.
You know, Caddyshack.
Yeah.
Caddyshack does the same thing. Is it Danny or like the kid who wants to get the scholarship? The world needs ditch diggers too. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I can't remember because Caddyshack 2 is my favorite.
you're one of those. You know, but you know, I think Harold Ramis really changed comedy and is one of those people. You know,
I do think it's funny because I think you would call Danny's behavior and his perspective of his work now, he would be an edgelord, because it's like, oh yeah, no, you wanted to do this gag over here that's really thought out and profound, but like I want to make this gag, and it's like it kind of shows his sort of like not naivete, but like the fact that Harold Ramis is just a more well-rounded writer, because he can both work in a studio system and he can write disruptive, like you were talking about. Like he does, and he's got a damn good resume that shows how disruptive a lot of his early comedy was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's the unfortunate thing. And I think it honestly is kind of what maybe got Danny a little too stuck where he was, is that he didn't take lessons where he could get them. And he was too believing in his ability to like be profound.
Yeah.
And that it's like, oh no, I just need the right audience for my stuff.
Yeah. Because I think that, because I think like that list of 10, I think there's other movies on there.
Oh, there's so much good stuff in there.
And I think he could have walked away from this learning how to keep the edge, but also learning how to like work with the studio on having to develop a piece that, you know, that kind of works.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love most about Groundhog's Day, reading the script and then seeing how it happened. I love seeing what Bill Murray adds to it. I love seeing what some of the other improv actors add to it. I love seeing, this is a great example of a director, and we see this all the time now, of, you know, some of our, you know, like whether it's the Russos, who did a lot of Arrested Development, Paul Feig.
Yeah, Paul Feig has some really good
Judd
work.
Apatow. Like, these guys know how to work in the studio. They know how to, like a lot of the Marvel movies, they know how to get these scripts and other things going. But then, while everyone else is working on the special effects and very rigorous, like the movies need X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
They know how to, just like Groundhog's Day, they know how to keep everybody in their place doing what they need, and then to just focus on the actors and get stuff out of them that goes beyond just CGI and other stuff. And I don't know if the Marvel movies for me are exactly that. Some of them are. But I do think that's an example. And I think it's the same thing with stuff that Paul Feig does, stuff that like, you know, Judd Apatow do. They take movies that if you took all the comedy out of it, it could be a movie, but it wouldn't be a movie. I think the best example of this is actually Airplane. What the Zucker brothers did. They took a movie, I think it was a British airline movie. They remade the movie, but they
was it Airplane?
Airplane 757 or
67.
Although Airplane 1980 spoofs disaster films of the 70s, it's directly a spoof of the 1957 Paramount movie called 0 Hour. God, what I wouldn't give to work on a plane. My cousin is a black box. I bet they could put in a good word.
You know, so they have a plane that's gonna crash. They have people who get sick on the plane. They have all, but the Zucker brothers didn't lampoon it and turn it into a spoof.
Yeah,
they were, you know, they took that over the top. But I think that's what a lot of good comedy does, is if you took all the comedy out, it could still just be a movie on its own. It just would probably suck, you know?
Yeah, and so we have to thank Groundhog's Day for really, it didn't create it, but really elevating that time loop niche so that you could have movies like Day After Tomorrow, Happy Death Day, which actually is kind of a really fun movie. And then a movie that I think it came out only for Hulu that I watched with Andy Samberg in it, called Palm Springs. And these are movies that sort of got to play with the genre a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Because so many people were willing to go along with that trope because of how good Groundhog's Day was.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like it paved the way for people to do crazier and weirder stuff, like the whole killing yourself thing that Phil was doing. Happy Death Day really they capitalized on that, and they really perfected some really great scenes where the main character has to sort of like, she does something wrong and then she's like, oh Christ, and she just kills herself so she can get started again.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think any of those movies are particularly better than Groundhog's Day, but what I like seeing is them being allowed to sort of have this sandbox to play in.
All right, look, the way I see it is you have unlimited amount of lives, so you have unlimited opportunities to solve your own murder.
So I'm just supposed to keep dying until I figure out who my killer is? That's your genius plan.
Danny Rubin said he had an idea for Groundhog's Day 2, and what you would do is you would hype up this movie. You'd probably call it Groundhog's Day 2, the Hoggening, or Groundhog's Day 2, Phil gets his revenge, and you would just re-release the original movie again.
That would be awesome.
All right, everyone.
All right, campers. Well, that's all we got.
Don't forget your booties because it's cold out there today. Thank you for coming down to the shelter again and listening to us just jabber on and on about the things we love. And we hope you love them too. Go to Instagram at shelter.from.oblivion and check out some of the stuff we've put up there. We don't just post things about the show. There's just funny and interesting things that, usually I find on the internet, or, goodies that I've bought. We post things about toys. I've got some stuff coming up that I'm going to get in the mail that I actually have a gift for Andy from our last show, Back to the Beach. Go check that out. Back to the Beach is such a good episode.
I'm proud of that one.
I'm not even going to have any, that's full ego. I really enjoyed making that, and I think it came out really well. But yeah, I have a gift for you.
Please be the comb switchblade.
No, that's so close. No, I think you're going to like it, and I'll probably post pictures of what it is on the internet.
Better not be Skippy peanut butter.
Yeah, it's a lifetime supply.
Like a whole cabinet full of Skippy.
I got a good deal on it, so it's like a pallet will be delivered to your home. No, but check it out there. We also are on Facebook, so usually when I post on Instagram, it posts over to Facebook as well. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Have a great day. Lisa, take us out.
Well, congratulations. You survived another episode of Shelter from Oblivion, which means you clearly have a high tolerance for nonsense. And if you want to feel like you're stuck in a time loop, go check out our other episodes, because trust me, these two never shut up.
Bing!